Welcome everybody to our February episode for the Roundtable for a Customer Revolution. Today, we're going to be talking about the current economy, or what Bill and I have been calling the great downsizing, and how it's actually creating such a great opportunity for customer marketers if you're willing to change your MO, which really means to go from sort of waiting to be asked what to do or to be brought initiatives or getting requests to do things to help your company, to instead finding out what the C-level growth goals and challenges are for your organization, and then proactively coming up with strategies to mobilize your customers to drive those initiatives. So what we're going to do today is hear from a couple of CEOs about those growth goals, about the pressures, and what they're doing about it. But first, let me just introduce my partner in crime here, Bill Lee. Bill, welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everybody. Well, here's a little bit about me. I created the category that we now call customer marketing. I wrote the seminal book on this subject, The Hidden Wealth of Customers, published by Harvard Business Review and some 20 other publications with HBR. I built a global community around these concepts. It included research, advisory services, workshops, and also the longest running, most respected CX conference in the world, if I do say so myself. And by the way, for those of you who don't know me, some people wonder, what is your background for this? Have you ever built a customer reference program or marketing program? And the answer is no. And I haven't worked in a tech firm either. So what's my background that lends to this work that I'm doing? Well, my background is a B2B customer. I was a B2B customer in previous parts of my career with industries that you all work in and sell to, both in management and executive roles, everything from the Pentagon, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, to manufacturing, commercial construction, and so forth. I bring the perspective of your customer to this work. That's my formative kind of situation. So, Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself, or shall we launch?
Sure. Yep. So sorry about that. Again, I'm Jeff. I'm founder and CEO of Slap5. We are an enterprise end-to-end customer marketing platform, and that really helps you mobilize your customers to drive customer-led growth. And Bill, I'm probably the flip side of you in that I've been a customer marketing and advocacy practitioner for 30 years, no matter what official title I actually had, starting off as customer user group manager and product manager, moving into product marketing, and then being a CMO at 3 different tech companies, but always being responsible for the customer programs, customer engagement, customer loyalty, and then mobilizing the voice of our customers. Most recently, I did that work in the early 2000 teens at Forrester, where I built Forrester Frontlines, which was their first ever customer engagement program that totally transformed how the company did sales and marketing by, for the first time ever, not just giving away free research content and analyst time in order to build demand, but actually showcasing the initiatives that their clients were doing better with Forrester's help.
Awesome. All right, shall we launch?
Let's jump in. Why don't you introduce our guests?
Let's do that. Let me set this up just a little bit, and then I will introduce our guest. For our audience, for our attendees, we've got a great turnout here. It's good to see. Recognize a lot of you folks. So what's this webinar about? What's different about this webinar? And we believe that the current tech downturn is creating a huge opportunity for customer marketing people like yourselves, especially for the cathedral builders out there. The people who see a bigger picture, the people who ascend, whose goal is to ascend to the C-suite in your career. So the situation, of course, is that the usual growth engine of marketing, sales, and support, you might call them the big 3, are not working. They're too inefficient. They're becoming too expensive, and we're gonna get some firsthand perspectives from 2 exceptional CEOs on the pressures they're under regarding growth. And I want to just share a couple of things here. I want to share with you a graphic. Well, let's skip the graphic for now. We'll come back to that. But it's something that Nick Mehta, one of our guests, said at one of our early roundtables. when we were talking about what do customers need in order to become our customers and stay our customers and so forth. What do we do? What do we need to do for customers at risk to keep them, given that the old ways aren't necessarily working too well? And so what Nick told us was what he has found with his customers is that at every stage of the customer journey, when they're at risk, when they're making a difficult decision and not sure what to do, the person they want to talk to more than anybody is another customer like them. And that's true even in the post-sale, even with this, this is Mr. Customer Success here. I think, Nick's very modest about this. I think he's a driving force between the whole customer success industry. You might think he would say, well, post-sale, it's our customer success managers that they want to talk to most. No, he said even then they most want to talk to other customers like them. And that, folks, in customer marketing, that is your bailiwick, and that's what we're here to talk about. So let's tee it up. First off, and I want to ask both of you, I guess we could start with Christina. We know that traditional sales, marketing, the big three, those tactics are less effective. But what's different in your role as a CEO? How is the tone? How are the discussions with your board going on this? And Christina, why don't we start with you? And just a quick intro to Christina. Christina is one of you all. She has come up through customer engagement, if you will. She's been head of customer success, customer marketing at amazing firms like Salesforce and Slack. And she's ascended herself to the CEO role at LogicMonitor. And she describes her career over the last 10 years as been obsessive focus on putting customers at the heart of everything. Now, how many people have you heard say that? But how many people have you heard really do that? And she really doesn't. So Christina, welcome to you, and tell us about your discussions on growth with your board and your leadership these days.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I'm excited to be here with everyone. I mean, certainly it's no secret that the world has shifted, especially in the last, 8 months or so. And I think one of the things that is true is in SaaS businesses, when interest rates are low, people invest in the future. And so the recurring revenue stream and the subscription model is very appealing. But as the interest rates start to rise, that investment doesn't look as exciting to put $1 in for the future when they can get just as much money in today's world. So with that shift causes investors to really look at the expense line much more aggressively than investing in future growth. And so there's a lot of discussions around the balance of, one, how fast are we growing, but how are we doing that in a cost-effective way? And so there's a huge shift towards profitability and really ensuring that you can do that. And so that conversation is very different than the one that had been happening for the last 5 to 7 years, which was figure out a way to grow at all costs. So, every CEO and every board is certainly bringing in their biases and sharpening their pencils and really looking at, every line item and saying, what is the specific ROI here? If I invest in these people, in these programs, in these marketing dollars, what am I going to get in return, and what's the time horizon for that? And so that's putting, I think in some ways, a lot of healthiness around everyone taking a look and saying, are the things I'm doing moving the needle? But it's certainly putting stress and pressure on organizations maybe that aren't as well understood by the boards or CEOs at hand. And I know customer marketing is one of those. And so, having to spend a lot of time to kind of educate probably your CEOs and boards on truly what is that ROI look like.
If I could just follow up on that, Christina, you had begun these discussions last November when you were last with us at the November webinar, and you were at that point already broaching the idea of moving money from lead gen to customer customer events, or moving money from support to your community and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how is that discussion progressing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you opened up the conversation with what Nick, believes and philosophizes around. Customers want to talk to other customers, and they truly are the largest evangelists. And so having them help each other through problems, through solving specific issues, whether it's in their, overall business or with our technology, is something that's incredibly valuable. And so we did spin up a more extensive customer community here in really the last 6 months. And so we're putting a lot of effort and dollars into that. And that is something, that you can clearly see a tangible ROI, right? So, specifically in support, we can see, the investment from our team go down in terms of the hours they have, and then the customer satisfaction, the response time, all of that increases as they're talking to each other, and we're giving them those forums and those mechanisms to make that happen. And so that is something, that's very concrete. There's other stuff that's harder to measure, like the customer loyalty and their emotional attachment to you as a company. And there's a lot of things we do around that aren't necessarily just a support ticket, but bringing customers together, helping them, elevate them within their organizations and the work they're doing. And that's a little bit harder to measure. And, I think if someone at the CEO, CFO board doesn't, have that background for them to understand the intangible benefits, especially on retention and expansion, you've got to be a little bit savvier in how you're communicating that.
Awesome. Very great deal of food for thought there. Nick, not to be trite, but I thought I'd ask you the same question, and just a quick introduction for Nick. Most of you know very well. This guy has created the customer success, I think, the category of customer success. What are there, 200,000 customer success people? Last I checked, maybe it's 300,000 by now. I don't know.
Some in that range, but just to be clear, that actually Christina was the one and her team that created it, because Salesforce was the first pioneers of doing it. We just kind of were the cheerleaders to popularize it, but Salesforce, actually, Christina was one of the first people doing it.
Well, within their firm, but you built this industry, right? I don't think Salesforce was building it.
No, not.
Yeah. So come on, man. You deserve.
I give credit to Nick. I'm with you.
Well, both back.
Nice try, Nick. So the question for you is, that both at Gainsight as well as your customer base, it's how are you broaching this, and how is your board, Vista Equity? How are they responding? What are the conversations? Let's start with Gainsight. How are your conversations going internally with your senior people and your investors?
Yeah, totally. And Christina said it so well that I think you have to start from the vantage point of what is the new world of SaaS. And it's all about, basically at the end of the day, it's about interest rates and kind of like capital and what does it take to make, value for shareholders. That's not the only goal. We all want to drive value for customers, for employees, but that's certainly an important goal, right? And it's like the goalpost got moved radically in like 6 or 9 months. And it's hard because I think not everyone fully gets it, but I don't think this is a temporary change. Even though, if you follow the economy, interest rates are very high now because we're trying to control inflation. Long-term, they'll never go back to where they were, what people called zero interest rates. That's not going to come back probably in our lifetime. And so what that means is SaaS companies are going to have a long-term model for profitable growth, right? We call it durable growth at Gainsight. Some people call it efficient growth, whatever terminology you want. And when you really look at it, I know Christina and I look at this every single day, like what people call the P&L, meaning the profit and loss statement, like how are you going to make money as a company, right? When you look at that math, it's pretty simple. There's 3 core drivers for the profitability of a SaaS company long-term. One of them is your gross margin. So that's basically like looking at what you're selling and then the cost to kind of host it and support it and things like that, right? Probably not the scope of the people on this call. The second one is your ability to have good net retention. You're selling customers, obviously their ability to stay and grow. You really can never be very profitable if you don't have good net retention. And then finally, what's your cost to acquire a new customer? Those 3 variables are really the things that dominate this equation. So now connecting it to what everyone does here, what's the most efficient way to acquire new customers? Clearly, it's like organic advocacy, peer-to-peer, all those kinds of things. What's one of the most effective and efficient ways to drive NDR? Clearly, like getting customers to talk to each other, right? And whether that's informally, whether that's online, whether that's an online community, like there's a million ways to do it, but that is the way to drive efficient growth. So I would say, Bill, we were talking, Christine, we were talking, and I kind of think you could tactically look at this field and say, oh, case studies, references, reviews, or you could say, wow, this is the core to efficient and durable growth. And we have to figure out how to build this into our entire customer journey. And that's kind of the way I look at it. And we can talk more about what that means operationally.
I'd like you to elaborate just a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Last thing you just said.
Totally. So I think the question then is, how do you operationalize it, right? So, there's probably a world where some of you might be watching and saying, okay, well, right now people think of me as the person that's creating the reference database or the reviews online or the case studies, right? But then over here, there's somebody working on the new customer buyer journey, meaning for like new logos. And over here, there's somebody working on the existing customer success journey, right? How do we drive NRR, right? And so how do you connect these things together so that people look at the work you're doing as one of the most powerful tools to use in getting new customers and keeping and growing existing ones? Now, what does that practically mean? Practically, it means on the new customer acquisition side, how do you make all the work you do proactively part of the sales and marketing process, right? I think so many companies are just, including, by the way, Gainsight, you can totally be reactive. We need a reference, like somebody wants to talk to somebody else and, there's a Slack thread about it or whatever. And, there's a lot of stuff you can do there. But how do you make it so that when you think about your customer journey for new customers, like literally after every interaction, there's some kind of customer evidence that's been sent in. So as an example, we've been talking about like after every sales call, how are you nurturing some customer evidence to the customer, right? A 2-minute video from another customer, a G2 review, a case study, whatever, right? So how do you build that into the orchestration of sales and marketing? Now, same way for existing customers. When you think about like, okay, I have a customer that's an onboarding and now there's a CSM managing them. How do you build a digital journey where they're getting invited to your community, where they're getting nurtured, case studies about customers and what they're doing, where they're getting invited to a peer-to-peer office hours, right? And so to me, it's like engineering it into the journey versus making it more of a reactive thing. I think that's the opportunity.
Yeah. Let me follow that up just a little bit. Christina, I want to bring you into this. Could it be that this approach, because I hear this approach a lot, people trying to come up with how do we do growth now? And when I start hearing the list of things that they feel like they could be doing or want to be doing and so forth, it's a long list. And so to operationalize that, to systematize it, don't you need some sort of priorities on which of these to prioritize? And let me suggest a possibility here. Christine, we'll start with you and then back to Nick. How about prioritizing based on the company's most important growth objectives? Start with those. And then determine, okay, how's the customer journey with that objective? Why is it falling short of our expectations? And then let's get customer marketing, customer communities. Let's form maybe a SWAT team or something, use agile techniques to address that particular objective with the people that have those relationships with the customers that you can bring in to address it. Christina, you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a really important point, which is you start with the customer. And I think that seems sort of basic probably to all of us on the call, but oddly it's not, right? and if I even think about my board sometimes, they come in it from an angle of, okay, let's look at, all right, what's our cost per head per resources? Can we move to different locations? Should we expand into different markets? Should we use like they have a kind of a playbook that they go through, and are looking at those areas. And if you can actually pause and say, let's take a step back and let's say, what are we solving? What's the problem that we're solving? And what's the value that we're bringing to our customers? And then what are they experiencing? And then you can start to say, and so I'll just bring it really tactically for our company. So we're an observability platform. And so what that means is we help companies monitor or observe their technology stack, and we look for problems before they become a problem, which would ultimately bring their systems, down. And so we ensure that they keep uptime on their entire architecture. And we come in and we start by monitoring companies' infrastructure. So whether they have an on-premise data center, or they're using an AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, and we monitor that. And so we start and we say, okay, if that's what our customers are, that's where we're starting, how are they thinking about their infrastructure, and what are the trends that are happening there, and what are the real problems they're trying to solve? And when we look at that, we say, oh, wow, the bulk of our customers are moving more workloads to the cloud. And so what does that mean from, the products that we're bringing to them, how we're helping them solve that problem, from the resources that we're actually bringing to help bring that thought leadership and that advisorship. And so it goes to kind of what Nick was saying, was just like, bring that customer journey, like really, really understand. Then you can bring the tools and resources at that right time for where your customers are. And then you start to say, okay, what does that do to our business? Like, how much does that cost us to bring this here? What is the effect that that's going to have on our business? But if you start with that customer and you really start with, what's the value your company is bringing to them, that can put you in a much different conversation than starting in this kind of reactive, oh, here are the 4 things companies do.
And then
love
again,
that.
it's something that customer marketing people are very well equipped to bring to that table. Nick?
Yeah, I was just going to add in. I love that, Christina. And I think starting with the customer, like you said, it is a platitude, but it's also true. So there's a reason it's a platitude. And I think that so Lane Holt is our amazing customer marketing and digital CS leader inside Gainsight. She's in the session right now. You should totally talk to her and compare notes with her. And one of the things I love about the way that our team and her team has approached this is kind of when you think of customer, you can actually break that up even more, right? So there's a company that's going on a journey with you, but then there's actually individuals on that journey, and there's humans in the company, right? And so what I think is super cool is how Lane has structured some of our digital CS campaigns and customer marketing at the company level. So for example, companies going through onboarding and now they're in an adoption phase and so on, but then also at an individual level. Like for example, how do we get executives in our customers to engage more with our product, to be more bought in, et cetera, right? And I think that's an area where what everyone on this call does is so valuable, because you cannot do that through a CSM, like, to be honest, or a salesperson, because a lot of those executives just won't interact, right? But if you have a nice digital journey where you're nurturing them content, maybe from other executives, or you're showing them new tips and tricks about the product or whatever, you actually have a way to expand your reach within the customer. And we all know that, like, if you are single threaded through one person at your customer, you're extremely vulnerable. This team, everyone that's on this call, is key to like expanding the reach inside your customers.
Yeah. Awesome. Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you both, if I could, we've talked a lot about starting with the customer, obviously, whether it's a platitude or not, but one of the things I'm seeing with fellow CEOs is that even more so than usual, they're zeroing in their go-to-market priorities around a couple of strategies that really make sense in the current climate, whether that's doubling down on existing customers and trying to, maybe expand the footprint or relationship with existing customers, or maybe going after a an industry that you weren't previously going after, but you've got a strong base there. I wanted to see if either of you are looking at it that way when you compare all the things you could be doing from a go-to-market perspective. Is there anything that at the executive team level you're kind of narrowing in and saying, these are 2 or 3 or 4 areas where we really want to put a lot of cross-functional muscle and hold our company accountable for achieving these objectives? Because that's, I think, where Bill was going when he asked the prior question about like a strategic growth initiative. Does that resonate with you? Is that something that you're doing versus just saying, we're just going to continue to market and sell, right? And service. Christina, what do you think? Is that, oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I mean, that's our that's exactly what we're doing. So we have company objectives, and we have take a spin off of the Salesforce V2 Mom, but we have 6 objectives for the year, strategic kind of methods. And it was really interesting because we don't have a single ownership for it. And that was really tough for our company, because they're like, well, you know, one of them is for us, it's about helping customers as they go on their, you know, cloud journey. And we're like, well, that touches everything. You know, it starts at sales, marketing's got to have it, customer success has got to have it, you know, all of this. And so we put them all as the owner, and people and product, and people were very confused. They're like, well, wait, is this about product, building more product? They're like, or is this the sales number? Like, where does it go? And our board was even very confused, because they're like, well, who's the owner of this? And we're like, no, all of those constituents are the owner. Like, it has to be, you know, we have to say, are we building awareness for and demand for the product? Do we have the right product? And if not, how we get that, you know, feedback loops in quickly. Are we selling it? And are we putting specialized resources to sell it? And then, of course, are we supporting it and helping customers become successful, and bringing all of that into these quick feedback loops that you're learning from? And I think we actually put that as a metric for us. Wasn't just the revenue we're getting from the product or the retention we're getting from the product, but what are the learnings we're getting, and what are those feedback loops that we're getting? And that, I think, is really important. And then I'll just say one other thing, and we've tied to that, which is said, you know what, a customer story / PR is just as important as us getting the revenue from this. And that is also a weird thing to say, because everyone measures things around the revenue of it. And I said, I don't actually care right now about the revenue. I care about the feedback loops, and I care about the referenceability of, you know, true stories of customers being these showcase accounts for us.
And Christina, in those cases where you do have these initiatives that basically span the whole company, and there isn't a single owner, does it really basically roll up to you to make sure it's happening? Or have you designated an executive to just say cross-functionally, you own this, you're going to report on it and work cross-functionally to make sure it happens?
Yeah, we do a little bit of both. I mean, I think certainly, like, when we first started rolling out this concept, a lot fell on me, and that wasn't great. And I would say, like, this can't be my responsibility. Like, everyone needs to feel accountable to each other. And so we did a lot of work around that, which is like, I don't report back to me what's happening, like, you know, to our product leader. You need to report that to to our CX and sales leader. Like, you're responsible to them just as much as you are to me. And so I think we've really kind of created the culture around that. And then number 2, we do, and we switch it quarterly. So like on that particular method, because we have 4 leaders in charge of it, I do alternate who reports out on it. So every quarter we switch that up.
So we've got, I want to ask one more thread, then we're going to go to the audience here. Is there a need for, I mean, we want to get back to what do customer marketing professionals do? How do they communicate what it is they can bring? They have the relationships with the right customers. They've got, that's their most valuable growth resource. They've got those relationships. So how do they take them, say, to their current leadership or to their next job? And especially those that want to get to the C-suite themselves, how do they present what they do to their senior leadership, to their boards? What's the best way for them to do that? I mean, it's like if we agree, and I think lots of people are ready to hear this. A lot of companies, a lot of boards are ready to hear this. We've got to connect our customers, our best customers, to our at-risk customers and prospects. I think there's real receptivity to that. But how do they broach that? How do they describe what they do and so forth? To their leadership. Nick, how about you? Take a shot.
Yeah, sure. Great. I think the most important thing is attribution. So, people think about activities, I'm doing this office hours, this webinar, this case study, et cetera. And the question is how much can you show the attribution of that to an end outcome that shows up in the numbers, right? So some CEOs intuitively get the need to do these things like Christina, right? But like people like me and Christina are kind of biased because we've been doing this, we come from this world. The average CEO doesn't come from this world. And so they're starting from, okay, I've got a bookings target and a retention target, right? And it's a little hard to sometimes draw the direct attribution, but you could at least say, okay, how is this driving adoption? Like when customers that have been in office hours versus not, what's their change in adoption? Customers that have engaged in a customer marketing program, what's their change in advocacy, their change in NPS, any of this stuff. Give an example from a different domain. Our training team showed us that our customers that are certified on Gainsight's product have 2x the NPS of those that don't. And honestly, when I saw that, I was like, we should invest more in training. So the more you can show the attribution and kind of a A/B test, I think the more compelling the argument is.
Christina, what's your? I mean, you've gone through this path yourself to the C-suite. What would you have? What would you advise people, customer marketers, especially now, to accelerate their career growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things for me, and people ask this all the time about kind of moving into the CEO slot, is I was very well prepared because I was the customer advocate, right, within organizations, within, the companies I was at. And so I touched every function that there was. And so I think it really being, and I know, Nick, I hear you talk about this a lot, is that you're like customer success, customer marketing, whatever it is. It's not the ownership. It's not meaning that you own it. It means that you're advocating for it in your organization because the whole organization has to own it, right?
That's well put.
And so I think that if you are, if you're coming at it with that view and you're truly being this advocate and you're bringing it to light to all aspects of the organization, that's going to get seen. Everybody's going to be like, oh, wow, John, Mary, like they're the ones that are kind of pulling all of this together. And they're going to say, we need that leadership in an even more influential role.
So while we're waiting for some questions to come in from the audience, I see a couple starting now. I wanted to ask you both, because we're seeing in a lot of cases, we're seeing a lot of customer marketing people getting laid off, or their whole department is getting wiped out. I even saw last week a whole customer success team was wiped out and responsibility for customer relationships was turned over to account executive sales. And so there are a lot of CEOs and executive teams right now that are saying, we're just going to cut. And perhaps they're thinking we're just going to ride out the storm, batten down the hatches. What advice would you guys give to fellow CEOs that could help our audience here understand how they need to be talking about their value, above and beyond sort of the attribution model, which is a great point, Nick. But like what would you say if you heard a fellow CEO saying, yeah, we're just going to get rid of customer success, or we're going to get rid of customer marketing because we just can't afford it right now?
You want me to answer that one?
Yeah, sure.
I'm the most biased person in the world to answer it. I'd say that CEO should start thinking about their next job. But because time will come. Now, obviously that's tongue in cheek. I think a lot of it is about long-term versus short-term. In the very short term, of course, you can cut whatever you want and just try to eke it out. But if you want to build a long-term durable business, you have to figure this out. We just got some data from Bain Consulting that there's actually way more companies investing more in CS than other areas in the next 12 months than the opposite. You can pick some outliers. I know one of the outliers you're talking about. And by the way, there's a more nuanced story even to the one you were referring to there. And so I think there's a small number of people going backwards, and then there's like a large number of people going forward. You know, Christina and I both share an investor, and like we had this CEO summit a week and a half ago, and like everyone was talking about customer success, retention. Like this is like, you know, if you're not talking about it, you're not paying attention. Now, I think making the connection to customer marketing is a little more subtle, because I think a lot of CEOs don't always make that leap. I think that's what we have to all collectively do together. But yeah, I mean, I think honestly, there's a few companies that are going to go backwards. Most are going to go forwards.
And so you just hit on a huge point there, Nick, is that connection to customer marketing. And since that seems to be the bulk of our audience here,
yeah.
And again, I know you talked about the attribution just on the last question we asked you, but what advice would you give to the folks here about either how they change their MO, their behavior, how they communicate with executives to try to bridge that gap where it's not so obvious to a lot of CEOs who don't come from the customer world like we all do? You know, the value that not just customer marketing per se, but the whole idea of mobilizing your customers to be your best sales, marketing, and customer success people.
So I would say, like, it's interesting. Shelly in the chat said, I would guess that the ones getting laid off are not tied well to revenue. And I think that's a good way to say it. And if I just give you one real tactical piece of advice, when you have a slide you're presenting to senior management, CEO, board, anyone else, start with the end outcome that you're driving. And even if you don't have an exact number, even if you can approximate, you know, like for example, we have this many references that were used. We think the win rate with the reference versus not is X. So we think we've impacted this much dollars in revenue. So start with the headline number, then break down, okay, that headline number came from this many opportunities, which was this many case studies or references or community meetings or whatever. Don't start with the activity and then go to the number. Start with the number at the beginning.
Perfect. Christina, did you have a thought on that one as well?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And that's one thing that I found, you know, working with the board, even myself, is it doesn't have to be an in-year ROI. As long as you have put, you know, as Nick said, a clear objective that you're driving, why you're driving that objective, and, you know, what the impact's going to have, you know, on the business and the time frame around that. They're willing to make those investments because you can put a wrapper around it, right? And you've got to have these iterative checkpoints. So I'll say, hey, we're going to do something, you know, let's use a customer marketing example. This will not impact this year's revenue. So it is expected to impact 2024. But this year, these are the things that we're looking for. These are the leading indicators. And these are the rapid iterations that we're going to do to evaluate if it's working or not. And if it's not working, we'll make pivots. And the board can handle that because they know, they say, okay, well, it doesn't feel so big to them, right? They're like, okay, I shouldn't expect this huge thing to happen this year, but you've also broken it out into these smaller chunks and you're going to keep, you know, reporting on that. And if it's not working, then we'll stop doing it. So if customer marketing isn't working, then you should stop doing it, right? But hopefully you break it down into what's working, but it doesn't have to be this grand, and it doesn't, you know, I do think it's a great point Shelly said around tying it to revenue, but it isn't always revenue, right? Or isn't always revenue in this year. It may be revenue in 2 years, in 3 years. So you have to get them bought into what are those leading indicators that will lead up to that ultimate outcome.
And on that, Christina, if somebody, let's say you're a customer marketer, or somebody on your team is coming to you with this great strategy that they've put together for something that will start to pay dividends towards the end of the year, but really hit its zone there in next year. I mean, are you expecting them to come to you with sort of that end in mind, that end outcome in mind that Nick was talking about? Like, this is what we anticipate this year and next year? Because I imagine you would still want that versus saying, yeah, we're going to create 30 case studies and generate 50 peer reviews and things like that, right?
Right. It's like, why? I mean, there's, what's that book, you know, the 5 whys? You say, why are you creating this?
Yep.
Okay. Why are you doing that?
Well,
like,
why is
ultimately get to that. Yeah.
So, Jeff, could you put up the slide, one of those slides, the crush slide? And I want to broach this with our guests and also with other folks. I think everything is totally solid. Customer marketing, that one right there. It's you don't have to knock a home run every time. You can build, slowly, but you can keep costs low while you do that. That's one of the beauties. Hold it right there. So but would it not also be when you're trying to convince your board, let's say, or your senior level people, this is huge. When customers come together, I've heard so many people, Erica Cooley used to say this, Christina, back at Salesforce, when you put customers together, like in a community or advisory boards or whatever, magic seems to happen and big things can happen. We've got, Jeff and I have put together like dozens of these. There's many dozens in my book about how this can happen. So let's say, you have your first meeting with your CEO. You're applying for a job, or you're bringing an initiative to them and so forth. What do? Well, we work with our best customers. And let me give you an idea of how powerful it can be to connect customers with each other. And I actually tried this on the CEO beta that you and I did with a couple of other CEOs last year. So you start with the objectives, find out what the objectives of your C-level or whoever you're meeting with, what's the most important growth objectives to them. And the way I started this in that meeting was I just took 8 or 9 common growth objectives that most C-suites are addressing. Let me give you an idea of how powerful this can be. So I won't go through all of these, but we've got powerful examples for each one of these. For example, go to market, OnePlus, their story. Some of you may know this story. When they created their first phone to go to market, they didn't start with a product. They started with a community before they had a product. The community helped to design it. They also, after everybody loved it, they then started evangelizing it. First year's revenue, $330 million, minimal marketing spend. And that's a common theme with these kinds of situations. Salesforce, another example, acquisition, Salesforce early on. Its customers at events, these small events that Mark Benioff was doing, they closed 80% of prospects at live events. They tracked it. 80% became customers simply by talking to them, no sales pitch required. Let's do one more, retention. This is one that people in my community have seen a million times. What I'm trying to do is to get you to show this to your boss or to your C-levels and so forth. Show it to them because they'll love it. The roundtable loved this. And this is where they were having big decline in retention, very worrying decline in retention rates from the mid 80s to the mid 90s, from the mid 90s down to the mid 80s and so forth. And the leadership was thinking about we need to do a marketing campaign, big bucks, but they engaged their customer champions, kind of their special, special people, MVPs, if you will, in their community. They engaged them. Long story short, they put together all these events, forums, newsletter, blah, 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 and the retention rates completely restored. No need to spend on the marketing. Let's stop there. We've got dozens of these. Show it. So here's my question for you, Nick, and for you, Christina. If you're one of these C-levels, and maybe even you all, would that help to cement in your idea? Would that impress you? Would that intrigue you enough to say, this is interesting? I had no idea that customers could have that much impact on growth objectives. Tell me more. What do you guys think? Christina?
I mean, yes, obviously I'm biased like Nick, but of course, and I think it is so important to be able to connect those dots. And again, talk about what's kind of the long-term goal of building this company and how that even gets exponentially easier over time, right? The more you can build this customer loyalty and retention, it just becomes exponential over time. So it's not just this year that you see the results, but you see it for forever.
Right, and especially when you're doing a great job of connecting, taking that next step.
The only
Nick,
thing,
what do you think?
yeah, only thing so of course, same thing, totally biased to believe these things. The only, and the only thing very similar to how many of you, you have kind of anecdotes like this about your own product for your customers, right? And I think one thing to be aware of is there's a natural skepticism when people see these things, right? It's like pick any of these, right? Did Zoom's market share really grow to market dominance primarily because of natural customer advocates? I think in that example, probably yes. But like each one of these, you could kind of pick it apart. So the more, if you're doing this internally, the more you can have an argument that's a little more granular, right? So where you can actually, like in this example of SAS Canada, how do we actually look at the impact of these campaigns versus other things and what really had the impact? That's where A/B tests are always really interesting, because you can say, when we did this, here's what happened. When we didn't do it, here's what happened. It's a little harder if you just claim all the results because of your program, because many other departments are claiming that they're responsible for that too.
Well, I know exactly what you're saying, but in this case here, I'm very careful with these stories.
Yeah.
For example, the SAS Canada, that was Mark Benioff himself and his people that were tracking these prospects and customers in these conversations. So I give that credibility. And OnePlus, they formed their community first. That's verifiable. And the co-creation and the evangelism and so forth, and also not spending, very minimal spending on marketing. That's verifiable. So I think you can come up with this. I'll say it again. I'm still amazed by the magic that can happen by putting these folks together with each other, stuff like this. And I've done my best. I mean, it passed Harvard Business Review's threshold for those examples. I think it's doable and it can be done, made credible.
100%. And by the way, hearing it directly from the customer is even more powerful. So to your point, Bill, like if I could hear directly from Zoom or SAS, that's the next level of this, right? So that's great.
Yeah.
So let's connect this to some of the questions that have been asked. I think Carolyn asked a great question about 10 minutes ago about additional examples of attribution and where do you start, because sometimes it's difficult. And tied into what we were just talking about, one thing that I'm always advising people is that, if you're looking to understand the metrics or the attribution that you want to report on or communicate, start with these initiatives that you're looking to drive, because in every organization there is that, those 3 or 4 strategic growth initiatives that have been set by the CEO or the executive team. And if you can, instead of just saying, yeah, we produced 30 case studies and we think we influenced 20 million in revenue, if you could say, yeah, we had this great initiative to expand the footprint within each account because we were selling 2 disparate products to the same audience and we needed to create, cross-sell basically. That was a great initiative, big initiative for the year. If you could start to show, well, how many of those cross-sell opportunities did we influence and close? Now you're actually talking about that specific initiative that those C-level folks care about. And then just the second point on that is, you don't want to be in that, did we cause this revenue? Did we produce this revenue? Which is another reason why it's always good to look at it from an influence perspective, because you can very easily measure things like, what percentage of current new customer acquisition pipeline have we influenced, or what percentage of expansion sales did we influence by mobilizing customers to participate. But you can also measure things like when customers have been influencing a sales opportunity, by what percentage have we been able to reduce the length of the sales cycle when there's been customer influence versus not customer influence? Or how have we been able to increase the average deal size when there's been customer influences versus not customer influence? So having spent 20 or 30 years at the intersection of sales and marketing and being in those finger pointing wars, like, you didn't really influence, directly cause that to happen. It's just so much easier to agree with those people on saying, yeah, we're not causing this revenue all the time, but we can measure the influence that we're having, or what percentage of our revenue we are influencing. think we had a couple more questions here as we got to the bottom.
Jeff, I think Ari has a
KPIs?
question as well.
Well, I know Ari's shy, but Ari, why don't you just voice your question instead of having me look for it?
Yeah, I literally just got off, and a couple of the people who were on this call were in our customer calls. We just got off a round table. One of the questions really circled around right now, right? We've moved from a place of abundance to a scarcity model, and it feels like that. Whether we should act like that or not, it feels like that. And there's a lot of people in the customer marketing organizations that are feeling like now is not a good time to say no to anything, right? I've got to be a yes person who says yes to everything. But there's this conflict of interest that's happening. And I'll give an example. It's not wholesome of the question, but it is an example to get your mind on what the conundrum is, which is like, let's say community. I'm a community manager. I'm also a customer marketer, and sales is now looking for any avenue to sell more. And they're going, we need to sell into this community. We have not done a good enough job to selling into our community. Well, this community is thriving and growing specifically because we're not selling into it and we're creating it a safe space. And so the question, and I gave answers of how you can sell eloquently within communities. That's not the point. The point is, how do you push back, and where is the area when you're talking to sales leadership and you're talking to marketing leadership and say, I get the needs and we want to support you, but also here's our best practices on this. Or how do you protect yourself of what you're actually doing well and not letting it get cannibalized because we're trying to say yes to everything everywhere?
Yeah, you can't do that. Ari, you can use the example of Mark Benioff. It's in his book about how he handled those, the community and the customer events and so forth. It's in his book. The no sales. This was the master salesman from Oracle, and he's telling his salespeople, lay off. We don't want you pitching. It destroys the whole dynamic. So lay off. And that's where he got that 80% number. So show him that.
The only other thing I'd add in, Ari, is from my perspective, and great to see you, by the way, is I think it's actually a better time than ever for people to say no. Because how do companies get more efficient? They basically say no, right? Like clearly what's happened in tech in the last 10 years is there's a lot of people doing a lot of things with very good intentions, but most of those don't have value, right? Outcomes and all that. A lot of things we're all doing are just not really working. And so I think every company worth their salt now is looking at every process and saying, is this really helping or not? And so I think if somebody in your shoes came up, Lane in our case said, hey, Nick, this isn't, people are asking for it, but I don't think it really is having an outcome. I think most CEOs and CFOs are eager to hear that right now.
Yeah.
And you would support her saying no then. Is that what you're saying, Nick? And
yeah, I'm saying, although I'm actually just looking for, like, there's, people all say do more with less. It's not actually the right approach. It's actually like, stop doing the things that don't work. That's right. How to get more efficient, whether it's selling to the wrong customers, having the wrong marketing tactics, right? It's not about like getting everyone to work harder. It's actually about like, let's stop wasting time by working on things that don't have an outcome. So I think we love hearing about things that aren't working, Ari, from my perspective.
The opposite of do more with less is actually do less more.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Look at that. That's a fortune cookie waiting to be written.
It's focus. It's just focus.
Focus, totally right.
But I think that's a good lesson for the people on the call here, because we are recipients of an endless barrage of requests where everybody wants a piece of our customers for every tactical need under the earth. And we have to balance that all. And that can be all consuming if we let it. But I think if I hear what you're saying, Nick and Christina, sometimes you just have to say no to those things that you don't think are going to have the great impact, because you need to be able to find the time to do the things more proactively that are really going to move the needle. And, go ahead. Sorry, Christina.
I say it to my marketing team every time. I'm like, are you in the driver's seat or are you just in the passenger seat receiving whatever comes to you? Because I hired you because you're an expert and I expect you to be driving what you're focused on and what you're doing, not just reacting to requests that people take. So I think you'll actually show up much better if you are really being a driver and the thought leader in your expertise.
Right. All right. Anybody feel more empowered right now? Put it in the chat if you feel more empowered. There you go, Allison.
Absolutely.
All right. How are we doing?
We're just at the top of the hour. Maybe just any closing thoughts, advice for the people on this call, Nick and Christina, as they're navigating this climate that we're in and trying to figure out how to, in some cases save their job, but, go from worrying about that to thriving in their job. Any sort of last minute tips you want to give?
I'd say just obviously empathy for everyone that, it's an anxious time. So you can't not say that up front. And I think both for companies and individuals, these challenging times, actually what ends up happening is some people and some companies are able to leapfrog, both in terms of the company, like leapfrogging your competition, as well as career-wise, you could leapfrog inside your company. And so there's an aspect of all this that can feel like, gosh, like batten down the hatches, go on defense and that kind of stuff. But frankly, the winners in terms of companies are the ones that look at this as an opportunity. So it's always hard to see that sometimes day to day, but I think it's there.
Excellent.
Christina?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it is an anxious time, but this is also an incredible time of opportunity. And in this role, if you really kind of approach it in an expert way and you bring your plan to the table, I think you'll be in great shape and make a huge difference for your company. And that's how you get to the C-suite, because your leaders are saying, wow, you just brought this plan and you drove it and you had a huge impact in these tough times for us.
Awesome. And you in the stuff, the tools necessary to do that are in your pockets. You are what customers and prospects want. Your customers, they want to talk to the customers that the advocates and so forth that you're developing. That's what they want. So it's a huge step up. Not more sales, not more advertising, blah, blah, blah. So there you go. All right. Do we want to talk about the Cathedral Builder initiative that we were talking about earlier, or should we send out a follow-up on that, or what do we want to do about that?
Bill, I think why don't you just give one, do you want to give one sentence about that? And we'll then include it in the follow-up email for anybody that wants to participate.
Yeah, we got a slide somewhere, but anyway, we're putting together, we want to take cathedral builders, people who do want to ascend to the C-suite and are serious about it, because we want to enable that. We want to put you into a group, to a community eventually. Right now, we're looking for a steering committee to help us co-design, in the spirit of what we all do here, to co-design some kind of workshop or some kind of not intervention, but some kind of process to get you all sharp, comparing notes, and ready to go and take advantage of this situation, this opportunity during the downturn. So if that's of interest to you, stay tuned, and we'll send something to you shortly. And this will be your opportunity to raise your hand if you want to see about getting involved.
And so look for more information in the follow-up email to this webinar, but this will be a great opportunity for you to rub elbows with your peers, share ideas, bounce specific initiatives that might be going on in your company that you want to help support, get creative around ways you could do that, and then how to package it up to be presenting it to your executive teams. Just like these two CEOs told us, they're absolutely thrilled when anybody brings to them a growth initiative that mobilizes customers. So hopefully that makes everybody feel emboldened. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Good to see everyone. Hey, Sarah Schreiner, how are you? Carlos, good to see you. Ari, great to see you.